Welcome this afternoon. I'm interviewing Clint Padgett, and my name's Jann Freed. You can call me Dr. Jann. And we are interviewing people for a Leadership Legacy Summit. And I'm thrilled to have Clint as part of our summit. So I'm going to do a brief introduction here. Clint is a seasoned entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience as a project manager and leader. He's a published author, teacher, and expert in team building and the art of conversation. Clint is a Forbes Books featured author, Forbes speaker, thought leader, and frequently speaks at conferences on the subject of project management and teamwork, including the executive education program in the Scheller College of Business at the Georgia Institute of Technology, where he's also an adjunct professor. So welcome, Clint.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Okay. Great. Well, I understand you have a new book coming out titled Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment. Tell us, how do teams triumph and what does that mean? I mean, here's your chance when's your book come out, Clint?
It'll be out in August.
Okay. So none of us have had a chance to read it yet. So tell us, why we should read it, what it's about, and kind of, an overview of what's most important.
Sure. So I think that to be successful in almost anything that we take on in life, whether it's a project or a personal endeavor, it usually takes more than just an individual. It typically would take a team. And I've been involved in my career on some fairly massive projects, including things like 55-story, 1,200-foot tall construction of a facility in Times Square in New York City, to an ag tractor designed for a new agricultural tractor that had 25,000 activities in the project plan. In order to be successful in any of those things, it takes everybody pulling in the same direction. I've always found it fascinating that if you take just one person who goes in a different direction than the rest of the team, how much that one person pulling against the other 20 can slow you down if they're working at cross purposes. It can negatively affect the project. So to me, to triumph in the end means we need to work together, work as a team, not as individuals. And now that's going to require that each of us perform our individual task on time, in the right order, do our work individually, but that's going to be a part of a collective or the whole. And I think the point that I'm really trying to make is I'm a big observer of human nature. And when I teach classes, let's say there's 60 people in the room. This always happens. All the engineers will sit together. Why? Because they all speak the same language, right? They all had to take differential equations in college, and we share that badge of honor, or we all get the same jokes. It all makes sense to us. And they kind of sit close to the IT people who also all sit close together. And the IT people and the engineers, they don't mind sitting close to each other because they kind of speak the same language. They're both technical, but both groups want to sit as far away as possible from the marketing people. And why is that? It's because the marketing people speak a different language than the engineer does. And I could talk about engineers because I am one. I'm an electrical engineer is my background. And so I look at the marketing. I'm going to play some stereotypes here, but I think there's a grain of truth in these stereotypes. I look at the marketing person on the team and I say, what do you actually do? You come in and you talk big picture and strategy and fluffy white clouds and blah, blah, blah. You have a lot of meetings, I notice, and they're always at lunch. You eat a lot of really good lunches. But at the end of the day, when you go home, what have you actually done? And I say, as an engineer, when I go home at the end of the day, you can see code that I've written. You can see a piece of equipment that I've designed. You can see it, touch it, feel it, because what I do is tangible. What you do, I don't see. And then the marketing person's response to that would be, well, thank you, Clint, for that apparently really low opinion you have of me and what I bring to the table. But let me explain. If you didn't have me giving you direction, Clint, you're so far down in the weeds as an engineer, you're going to run into the wall or fall off the cliff. You need me giving you direction. And the point I like to make in that point in time is, assume I'm talking to a company who's not a nonprofit. They are a for-profit company. I would suspect you do projects to make money. So if marketing is out there selling something that we can't build as an engineering team, or if we're building something marketing can't sell as an engineering, as a product, we're not going to make money. So we actually have to work together and pull people out of those silos and be able to plan collaboratively. And so some people would say, well, that's all great, Clint, when you're talking about a team project, but what about an individual endeavor? And I rarely see individual endeavors. I think about an individual event, maybe somebody climbing a mountain by themselves or running a marathon. Well, while the individual is getting all the spotlight, there's probably a team supporting that individual. There's certainly equipment they have to use, whether it's the shoes or the chalk or the pivots they use to go into the batons, rather, to go into the cliff face. There's a team supporting that individual. In fact, one of my friends is Joe Hamilton from Georgia Tech. He was a quarterback at Georgia Tech back probably 20 years ago now. And people may recognize his name because he's a first-team All-American. He was the winner of the Davey O'Brien Award, which goes to the best quarterback in the NCAA that year. And he was actually first runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. And as a friend of mine, I think he got a job. He should have been the Heisman Trophy winner, not first runner-up. But when I saw him get inducted into the Georgia Tech Hall of Fame, I was lucky enough to be there. And he made it a point, even though he said, listen, I won this award individually. It wasn't me. He said it was all of you. And he called out his teammates by name, individually. If you hadn't done your job calling play as a center, we wouldn't have been successful. If my guards and my tackles hadn't blocked for me, if my receivers hadn't caught the balls or maybe a little bit off, if my running backs hadn't done their job right, I would not be receiving this apparently individual award, when in reality it's a team. But only one of us is up here today. But he gave credit to that. And to me, that's how teams triumph, is we win together, regardless of who gets the credit.
Oh, I love that. Well, we look forward to your book coming out and look forward to reading it. So let's talk about, what you do during, your expertise and this pandemic. How are remote workers working most successfully during the pandemic? I mean, we've got remote teams, and I'm reading a lot, like in Harvard Business Review, about how teams should function. What's your advice on this?
Well, I think that what I'm seeing that people are being most successful during this time is they're taking advantage of the extra time that we're afforded, because now I no longer have that hour or two commute each day into work and back. I've also got the flexibility of when I do my work, I can take my lunch when I really want to. I don't have to wait for a conference room to be available. I'm leveraging technology that's at my disposal now through Zoom and all the other things that are out there, Microsoft Teams, whatever those tools are. I think we're taking advantage of that extra time as well as the flexibility. But I think also those that are being most successful are the ones that actually have a plan, that they know what to work on at the right time. So they actually have a plan they're able to follow. And by the way, having that plan now when you go remote is a lot better than having to try to develop the plan while you are remote. That makes things much more difficult, is to try to develop a plan that normally we would say is done collaboratively all together. They try to develop that in silos. We're back to being in silos again if we're not careful, right? So I think that does make it more difficult. But
okay, Clint, go back. I want to hear that again. What'd you say? It's important to say it again.
So basically, I think that we are taking advantage of the extra time that we have available to us, the technology that we have available to us.
Plan to work remotely before we need it, or what did you say?
That's ideal. What we found is from our clients, they're able to, the ones we actually had project plans already put together for, that we built together collaboratively. Now that they're remote, it's not a problem. They know what to work on. They have accountability to each other. They built those bonds of accountability, and now they're able to work remotely with really little impact. But if you have to develop the plan while you're remote, that's more difficult, because now there's a tendency when you're remote to go fall back into your silo.
Sure.
And it's hard to build plans in a collaborative way when you're remote and in silos. So for instance, even though I know they all talk about the new normal, we go back and never be the same, I just think that there's got to be a face-to-face component. Whether you spend most of your time remote or not, there's got to be a place up front where we are face-to-face. And I'll give you the example of what I mean by that.
Okay.
So let's say that you and I have worked together at Acme Corporation for 15 years. But Acme is a global company, and I'm in Atlanta, and you're in Silicon Valley or somewhere else. And so we've actually never met. I only know you as Dr. Jann at acmecorporations.com. And when I finish my task, I email it to you. You do some magic. The company makes money, and everybody wins. Well, at Acme Corporation, I've got 5 other projects that I'm working on, plus the one that I'm working with you on. And so I'm a good employee. I'm putting in my 50, 60 hours a week. I'm doing more than my 40 for sure. And let's say that this time, this week, I've got a task that's due for you, and I'm just not going to make it. I realize your task fell to the bottom of my to-do list, and it's just not going to happen. But I don't really feel bad, because I'm putting in my 60 hours. So I'm doing my job. I'm a good Acme Corporation employee. So when I finally finish the activity 4 days late and send it to you, it's off my plate. It's over the fence. It's yours. And now I get to go devote my time to the other projects. Well, let's say that we take a different approach, and we actually come together and we face-to-face plan the next project. And so for the first time in all the years we've worked together, I go, oh, it's so nice to put a name to a face. How you doing, Dr. Jann? We shake hands, we exchange pleasantries. And over the next 2 or 3 days, as we build the project plan, let's say it's just 2 days that we're doing that. That's 2 lunches, that's 1 team dinner, and that's 5 or 6 coffee breaks. So we get a chance to know each other. That's not going to happen through electronic means. And Zoom, if I got a break, I'm putting my headset down, I'm running to the restroom, I'm not having a conversation. And there are so many positive things that come out of those conversations. Yes. Where what I'm really doing is I'm changing you from an email address, which is what you are right now, into a living, breathing human being that I now feel accountable to. Yes. So what happens in that scenario is we're planning the project, and I notice that the activity that I feed into you, like I always have, I'm on what's called the critical path of the project, which means that if my task is late, the project is late. And I say, well, Dr. Jann, I think that's wrong because I know for a fact I've been late in the past. In fact, the last project we worked on together, I was late and the project wasn't late. So clearly something is wrong. And you reply back, no, Clint, that actually is correct. But the last time you were late, you were 4 days late. And I remember this vividly and I had to make up for that lateness because I knew that if I was late, the project was going to be late. So I made up for that lateness by working 2 weekends in a row. And you were not a very positive, or your name was not a very positive name around my household those weekends because I had to miss 2 big events in my daughter's life that I will never be able to go back and see now. I had to miss them while I made up for your lateness. And now I start to feel bad because I've got kids, your kids' ages, and I wouldn't want to miss something in my kid's life because of some big event like that. So when I go back to Atlanta and you go back to Silicon Valley, you're still Dr. Jann at acmecorporation.com. But I now have established a relationship with you that the next time the project starts, I'm going to make sure my task is done so that you're not going to be late. All we've done is we've turned you into from an email address to a human being. We've established those bonds, and the rest of the project can be 2+ years long and be done remotely, as long as we have that establishment of relationship up front.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that. What mistakes do you see project managers and workers making during this time?
I think we do fall back into the silo trap where, we're happy to be in our silo and our little cocoon. And I also think it's interesting. I think most human beings, one of the things I've observed in my career is as human beings, we like to check things off of our to-do list. We want to check box it off and done, move to the next thing. And because of that, we're going to use these collaboration tools we have in order to make that happen quicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a text saying it's done. I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to post on Jira or some other collaboration app that it's done. Because what I want to do is just check it off my list. What I don't want to do is pick up the phone and call you and have a conversation. Because if I have that conversation, I might learn that I'm not done and there's 3 more things I need to do as a result of that. So I am very happy to go back to my silo, treat it like an over-the-fence scenario of send you a text message or email you and not actually have that conversation. So I think that people have this desire to check them off the list. They fall into the silo trap. They use electronic communications as a crutch, and they don't actually have conversations. And I'm a firm believer that conversation adds clarity. And clarity, when you're working in a remote environment, lack of clarity is what's going to cause your project to fail or cause you to work on the wrong thing at the wrong time. We need clarity, and clarity comes from a 2-way dialogue, not a 1-way conversation or 1-way communication.
No, that's great. One book I've often used in some of my leadership courses is, I think the title is Reclaiming Conversation by Cheryl Turkle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, she talks a lot about how we're in this age of technology, we're losing the art of conversation, that people would rather just tune people out at all levels, lawyers and, it doesn't matter the skill level. And would you agree with that kind of?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great book, by the way. She has a new one coming out, I think, next couple months. So, but yeah, I think we very easily, we want to use technology as a crutch, and we just want to throw it over the fence. And now it's Dr. Jann's problem. It's not mine anymore. It's off my list.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, tell us what makes for a great project manager. What are some of the either skills or tasks or practices that people do if they're really good project managers?
I do think we have to communicate. There's a chapter in my book called Communicate Like a Person, Not an Emoji.
Oh, cute. That's
and that's it's about having conversations. I did a presentation a year ago for one of our clients who wanted effective communication, and happened to be the time I was writing this chapter for the book. And it turns out my definition of communication was wrong. I thought communication was what we're doing right now. I thought communication was the same as a conversation, but it turns out the definition of communication is an exchange, or it can be a one-way information flow. I can send a text message or an email, and that is technically communicating. And that wasn't what I want to do. I want to have a conversation, which is an oral exchange of ideas. And so to me, you think about the game you maybe played as a kid where there were 5 people in a row and you whisper the secret in the first person's ear and they had to turn around and whisper to the next person.
Telephone.
Yeah, telephone. And what came out of person number 5 is not remotely close to what you said to person number 1.
Yes.
Well, that is actually communicating. But what's missing is the clarification of questions. That be a conversation where, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Are you saying this? Are you saying that? So by having a conversation, we forced clarity. So I think what effective project managers are doing right now is forcing people to have the conversations and not allow them to default back to this place they really want to be, which is in their silos. Right? Think about, especially, let's talk more about electronic communications, if you will.
Yeah.
So I actually walked by a group of people not long ago, and they're all standing in a circle, facing each other, but they're all looking down, busily typing away on their smart device, right, their phone. And I thought to myself, they could be having a conversation, I suppose, but nobody's making eye contact. They're not talking to each other verbally. And maybe they're even talking to each other as a part of a group chat, but I don't know what's actually going on there. And it occurred to me that we've actually come full circle as a human race. You think back to early days of mankind when I was in the cave and I wanted to communicate to you what we're going to go do. I would draw a picture of a buffalo on the wall, or a mastodon, or a woolly mammoth with a spear, and I'd point at it, and point outside. Let's grunt. Let's all go outside and get dinner, essentially. And then, time crept on, and then for eons, we passed down information to our children and our grandchildren by verbal communication. We sat around fires and we told stories, and that's how we passed down history. And then we had written word, and we wrote these huge novels. I think the biggest one is it's actually 3-point-something million words, but I discount that one because it's called The Blah Story, and 95% of the words of the word blah are written over and over and over again. But there's one that's 2.2 million words. And I mean, these massive tomes we were able to communicate, through written word. And then email came out. So it turns out email came out in, I think, 1979 or 80, but it wasn't actually really popularized until the advent of internet, which was, of course, late 80s, early 90s. And so now we communicate through electronic means. And of course, the amount of text is much shorter on an email. Then Twitter came out in 2006. And now if I can't say it in 140 characters, apparently I can't say it. And then around the same time in Japan, emojis got created. And so now I'm thinking to myself, we've literally come full circle. Now if I want to communicate to you, I do, and I send you a picture of a smiley face. That's not communicate. That is technically that's communication, but it's not a conversation. And I think we need to have conversations, which is an oral exchange of information to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so to me, it always comes back to clarity of message, clarity of what we're doing. And I think to be effective as a team member or a project manager in this world of remote, we have to take more ownership to make sure we understand, which requires more conversation, not less.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Well, in addition to communication and conversations, what else ensures a project is successful? Some people listening, watching may not be that familiar with project management. I mean, what really makes a project successful? And really from a leadership standpoint.
Well, I hate to beat a dead drum, but it's all about clarity. So we start off our project work with a document called a charter, which is where we, the team, establish what we believe the project is. And that's not always easy because there might be 15 different opinions if there's 20 people in the room about what the project is. So the first thing is about getting all of us on the same page. And then showing that to our customer saying, is this what you want us to go do? And oftentimes they'll say, close, or sometimes they'll say, no, I don't know what you're thinking. That's not remotely what I want you to do. So it's all around gaining clarity about what's in scope, what's out of scope, what is the project supposed to deliver, right? Making sure we're all on the same page. And then we're very much team centric. So it's all about having the team build a plan. I have been fortunate enough to work for one of our clients on the Olympics since the early 90s. We've done all the Olympic planning for that major sponsor for the Olympic Games since the early 90s, and all the FIFA World Cups for them as well since the mid 90s, 98. So I did a lot of work in Brazil. And then based on, to develop the plan for the FIFA World Cup for them. Now, based on my specific knowledge of the FIFA World Cup in Brazil and my overall knowledge of Olympics going back to 20 plus years, I probably could have gone off by myself in a vacuum and built a pretty good project plan for the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. But I would never do that because that would always be Clint's plan. It would never be the team's plan. Mm-hmm. So another thing I think to make successful projects is if the project manager, regardless of their knowledge base, if they understand that the collective is always smarter than the individual and lets the team build their plan for their project, that builds that, and done in a collaborative way, that builds commitment, that forces commitment, and that gives you a much higher probability of successfully completing your project is if we do that.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. Well, given, we've talked a little bit about this pandemic and what we're living through now. What are you predicting for the future? What do you think? Because one of the things that I've said quite a bit is, I bet organizations realize they don't need big buildings, or they don't need quite the office space. I mean, I'm predicting commercial real estate will be difficult. I don't know. What do you think in terms of work? I mean, what are you thinking?
Well, the first thing I think is Zoom fatigue.
It is. Yeah.
And the second thing I think is sorry, go ahead, Dr. Jann.
No, well, I call it zoomed out, but you're right. Yeah. Zoom fatigue. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the second thing is I want to retire the word pivot. I'm tired of hearing it. Let's pick a different word. But I think you're right on, because I have read some recent articles about as these people come back into work, they're going to realize we don't need this amount of real estate. So I think Twitter has already said, don't plan to come back. You're going to work remotely now from now on. They've also said that we'll still come into the office for team meetings. There will be some face-to-face, but the bulk of it's going to be, I think, remote. So I do think that's going to have a substantial impact on, the amount of constructions, the amount of floor space needed. It's going to have a deleterious effect on new construction of facilities. Renovation of facilities may become more important. I don't know. It'll really be interesting from that perspective. I do think you're going to see an acceleration in technology, collaboration tools, ways of communicating with us. But as I've already said a few times, I don't see it ever truly replacing the connection we're able to make when we're face-to-face interpersonally than it would doing everything remote. But I do think there are tools that'll come up, because I actually saw a tool where you can do virtual reality, where you put the thing on and now you're literally just like you're right in the room. But I still don't think that's going to, and that certainly is better, right? So Zoom is better than just a phone call, and because now I can see the visual cues and things like that. And maybe that would also be helpful, but you're still going to put your phone down and you're going to go to the restroom, go get coffee. That's going to be an independent individual event as opposed to a group setting. So I think that's not going to be the end all be all. And I do have some concerns though. I mean, I just saw an article the other day where I think it's Cushman and Wakefield at their Amsterdam office have put together a concept called the 6 feet office. And they've actually designed an office space where they are able to ensure everyone stays 6 feet apart. So that they do that through placement of desk and file cabinets to keep you separated. They actually have in the carpet, they have 6 foot circles cut out in the carpet, different color. So you know when you're within somebody's 6 foot circle. And I just thought, maybe it's just me because I'm a people person. I don't know if that's the world I want to go back into. I mean, I don't want to be in a bubble. Then I may as well just stay home. If I have to worry about getting within 6 feet of you, I mean, do I really want to look at all my people and all my fellow humankind and all I see is a germ carrier and not a somebody I establish a bond with? That's not the world I want to live in, but that is a concern.
Yeah.
If I took some positives, I would hope that maybe there are better air filtration systems that get developed to go in office spaces. So when we do come together, and there is a germ, it's better cleaned out of the system quicker, so it's less chance to hurt or to make someone else ill. And finally, I would hope that people now realize they can work from home and they don't feel this need to come in and spread their cold to everybody else. Right. So work from home and keep it to yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, I want to shift gears here a little bit because my interest right now is on leadership legacy. And so I'm just going to ask you some questions that I find interesting. When I use the word legacy, what does it mean to you? How would you define it?
So I'm not sure this would be the textbook definition, but my definition of legacy would be the perception someone has of you when they think of you. Right? That to me is legacy. So for instance, what is Bill Gates' legacy? Is it the CEO of Microsoft and the founder, or is it the philanthropist in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? I wonder what his legacy will be long term. I suspect he's going to be more known for the philanthropic work he and his wife have done, and the founder of Microsoft will almost be a footnote. But I could be wrong. But to me, that's what I see as his legacy.
Yeah.
I live in Georgia, and of course, one of the most famous people here is is Jimmy Carter.
Uh-huh.
And when I think of Jimmy Carter, I recognize he's a governor of Georgia and he was a president of the U.S., but I see his legacy more as Habitat for Humanity. Even as old as he is, even as aged as he is, he gets out there and hits that hammer and he goes and does his thing. And he's probably better known for his work in foreign relations. So I think that's going to be more known. His legacy will be more that than it will be anything he did in public office.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I'm a Jimmy Carter fan, and he's a perfect example of a sage, someone who's wise and generous and kind. And that's great. Actually, you kind of answered my next question. Can you share a story that comes to mind, when you think of legacy? And I think, Jimmy Carter is just a perfect example. And I think Bill Gates is a good example too. And no, those are excellent. How do you think people might change how they think about legacy because of the pandemic?
Well, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this question, and I do think it gives us the opportunity for maybe modifying the narrative that currently exists if we're not happy with it, but also maybe reinforcing the narrative that's out there if we do like what we see. So I think a lot about, if I was going to create my own legacy, and first of all, I don't really control my legacy, do I? My legacy is determined really through the perception of others. So maybe somebody else here in this conversation between us thinks that Jimmy Carter is best known for president because he or she's not aware of the work he's done for Habitat for Humanity or any other good causes that he has. So really, I don't feel that you get to control your own legacy. I think you do what you do, and then other people perceive that legacy of what they see. And this, there was a survey done back in the late 90s. It was 1997 by U.S. News and World Report that I think will be really germane to this conversation. And they surveyed people and they said, what chance would you give the following person to get into heaven? And of course, when I tell you the people on the list, it's going to be obvious it was the late 90s.
Uh-huh.
But Bill Clinton, 52% chance to get into heaven. Hillary Clinton, 55% chance. Princess Di, 60% chance. Michael Jordan, 65% chance. Oprah Winfrey, 66% chance. So maybe you can buy your way into heaven, all right? Mother Teresa, what percentage do you think people gave Mother Teresa for getting into heaven? What chance did they give her?
100?
79%.
Well, high, but
79. There was actually one person who scored higher than 79. Who do you think that was?
Oh.
They scored 87%.
Oh, boy. Better than Mother Teresa?
The people being surveyed.
Huh?
The people being surveyed. They gave themselves a higher chance to get into heaven than Mother Teresa. And why? Because I judge myself based on my intent, what I intend to do. I judge you based on what I actually see in the results. So I think that I don't really control what the perception others have of me, right? I got to believe Mother Teresa, she probably never thought about it anyway because she's a very humble woman. But if she did, I think she probably gave herself a much higher probability than 79%.
Yes.
And I bet other people who looked at Joe Sixpack probably didn't say 87%. They probably said 27%. But we judge ourselves based off of our intentions. So I think that when it comes to legacy, we do what we do, and other people will establish a legacy for us through their perceptions of what we do. Now, having said all that, I do think you have a chance to influence the legacy. For instance, there was a person out of Aurora, Colorado that was in the news recently, retired firefighter Paul Carey, who volunteered to go to New York City and help during the pandemic.
Yes.
He lost his life as a result of that. Now, his legacy is now set. I don't care what else he did. I'm sure he had a great legacy anyway, being a firefighter for X number of years, but he will forever be known. His legacy will be as a selfless giver who did the best he could and lost his life as a result of that. So if you don't have a legacy that maybe one you're proud of right now, I think you have this opportunity right now to go change it. What are you doing during shelter in place? Are you spring cleaning? Or are you actually organizing lunches for frontline workers? Are you finding materials, collecting materials through Nextdoor or whatever to be able to give to those people? So I think you have a chance right now, because it's so over-focused and hyper-focused. I think you have a chance maybe to influence your legacy if you're not happy with what it is today.
Yeah, that's really, Clint, that's great. Where was the story again about the firefighter?
Remember? I don't remember. I saw it on the news and I Googled it today just to make sure I had his name right, but his name is Paul Carey.
Okay.
And all I did was Google retired firefighter, New York City, but it was Paul Carey, Cary, and it'll give you what you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's a good story. No, it's excellent. That's really, really good. Well, I always like to ask people I'm interviewing, what else should people know that I haven't asked? What else do you want to share with us? We all have our favorite things to talk about.
Sure.
So maybe my questions didn't quite hit all the right buttons. So what else would you want to share with us, given your background? They can be stories or, success stories or things that you share with your students, because you're also a teacher. I do adjunct teaching and leadership. We have some time. So
well, one story that comes to mind actually
your favorite things you want to share.
Sure. Well, one story that comes to mind for me is actually is a legacy thing. And it was a personal legacy thing. So, my background is right out of high school. I joined the Navy, spent 6 years in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, got out, did that for 6 years, then went to work in a shipyard. And I can promise you there's probably no greater motivation to go to college in the world than to work in a shipyard in Norfolk, Virginia in December and January. So I went to college and got an electrical engineering degree from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Duke University. And so, did all that. And a few years later, I ended up buying the company that I worked for. And so I became the owner back in 2005, which is about the time we were going to have one of our, high school reunions. So I'm from a little town in South Carolina called Orangeburg. So I called back home to find out information about the reunion, and it happens to be one of the ladies who works in the school office was one of my classmates. And so she's asking, what are you doing? And so I tell her all this stuff, and there's this long pause. And she goes, Clint Padgett, who'd have thunk it? So clearly her perception of my legacy was different than what I ended up doing in life. So I love telling that anecdote because you don't know, when you're younger, you have a chance to maybe change the conversation around who you are and what you do. I was recently interviewing somebody from Harvard Business School, Allison Wood Brooks, who teaches classes on psychology of conversation. And levity is a big thing in having conversation is, don't be afraid to bring some levity to the situation. And we were both sharing tips and tricks, how we do that. And so I related, I was doing the Tokyo 2020 project plan for Coca-Cola at the Olympic, planning the 2020 Summer Olympics. And I had a picture of when I'd been there 15 years prior doing the FIFA World Cup planning with one of my coworkers. And so I put the picture of us together up on the screen to jokingly say, it's been a long week. This is what we looked like when we came here a week ago, right? And the translator didn't stop. She just said, oh my God, you were really good looking when you were young. And that's one of those things you go, thank you. I don't know what do you say to that, right? So so levity is good, but you got to have some backup plans in case your jokes don't go over very well.
Well, that's great. That's really good. That's really good. Okay, so last words of wisdom about either conversations or, actually, let me ask you this question. Given this time, I've been reading a lot about, loneliness, social isolation, stress, and all of that. In fact, I've read several articles about, be patient with your coworker. People are on edge. Sure. People are going to be irritable. They're going to be triggers. I was speaking with someone the other day, communication is a big umbrella. So, when I would teach students about this, they would say, well, it was a communication problem. We would do a case study and they'd say, well, it's a communication problem. I said, well, let's be more specific because communication is a big umbrella. What do you see as some of the main things that people should really pay attention to now, either in how they're communicating or the method or the tone or just anything about, because this is really an intense time when people could really get misunderstood or get upset with each other. I was reading some article about some guy flying on an airplane and just getting really irritable because, the plane was packed. He didn't expect that. He didn't want anyone sitting next to him, but, whatever. So people are going to get irritable. And so I don't know, what's your best advice on that?
Well, I think there's two aspects from my perspective. One is I am concerned about the mental health aspect of it, especially for people like myself. I'm a people person. So to be in isolation isn't necessarily where I really want to be, right? Sometimes I have no choice, but that's really not where I want to live my life, is in isolation. So I do think there needs to be, reach out to those people, right? In fact, it was on the news yesterday. Did you, maybe you already read this, but did you know most animal shelters are empty now because of the pandemic? People have gone out to get dogs and cats as a companion because I think of the loneliness aspect of it. So there's one positive, I guess, is now
that's good.
These critters have all found homes, which is really nice. But so I do worry about that isolation, that self-isolation. I do think we need to belong as part of a tribe. I think there's an inherent, even those of us who maybe aren't extroverts need that sense of community, I believe. So I think that's important. I would also say, as you said, communication is a big umbrella. So I would say let's over communicate, but let's choose the kind of communication. So I'm a big conversation person, but that doesn't mean I need to call you every 5 minutes. But I do think there are times when, let me just pick up the phone rather than trade or exchange 25 emails or text messages. Let me just pick up the phone and ask you point blank, what does this mean? So that I can go on and do the next thing. So I think for me, we want to communicate well, communicate often, but pick the right means of communication. And don't forget, even for those of us who maybe are introverted and don't like conversation, you still need to have it. Right. And I actually find that introverts, quite frankly, are usually pretty good one-on-one. It's the group dynamic that maybe they're a little bit shy of, but let's have the conversations. Let's talk to each other and let's have a dialogue.
Yeah. What if you have to have a difficult conversation?
I actually think that's even more important to have the dialogue, at least like we're doing right now, because how do you perceive? So if I send you 2 thumbs up about something, what does that really mean? Right? It's on your checklist of items.
No feedback, really. No.
You do it. Another one is like, you asked me a question. I send a smiley face back. What does that mean? Ha, I'm never doing this. You just don't know it yet. Right. I pulled one over on you. So I think it's already hard enough. How do you read the tone of an email? And I may write an innocuous email and my coworker, it comes across and there's a slap in the face. So I think it's better if you have to have a hard conversation. I would really rather that be, if not face to face, at least like this, so I can see when you roll your eyes. I can see when you're getting frustrated. I can actually anticipate that you're disagreeing and stop and pick a different way of attacking the subject so that it comes across in a way that's more palatable to you.
If you're going to have a difficult conversation, do you think it's better to use the phone versus Zoom?
I think I would use Zoom.
Would you?
Yeah, because I want to see you. That's the issue. I want to see I want the visual cues, right? So verbal is part of it, right? I can wait. I can look at the language you're using. I can wait for the pauses and how you're talking. I can get some of that, but there is, some people can't control their facial expressions.
Sure.
And so you may not mean to tell me you disagree, but you'll roll your eyes or you'll shake your head, not even knowing you've done it. And I can say, oh, wait a minute, I don't think that Dr. Jann agrees with what I just said. So let me explore that a little bit more. Let me say it in a different way that she might find to be more agreeable. So I do think the physical cues we get when we speak face to face, at least through a Zoom even, is better than just a phone call.
Okay, great, good. Well, our time's kind of come to a close here, Clint. I want to thank you again for participating in the Leadership Legacy Summit. And I'm going to give you you get the last words, okay? So like either your favorite phrase or a closing statement or something that you want us to remember, or a takeaway that it can be something you said before.
I won't get the quote exactly right, but it's a quote. I can't remember who said it even, but I use it all the time, which is basically the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That's my tagline. We think we've communicated, but we really haven't.
Interesting. I love that. And I think people, read into things and lots of assumptions are made. So excellent, Clint. Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.